Dutch politicians have condemned the violent demonstrations against COVID restrictions that have rocked the city of Rotterdam. The Justice Minister said authorities faced extreme violence. A number of people were injured, including police, protesters and a journalist. Tens of thousands of Austrians have been protesting in the capital, Vienna, against a new lockdown and plans for mandatory vaccines. The Austrian Chancellor has strongly defended the government's plans. Poland says there have been more attempts by migrants to cross from Belarus, with border guards reporting violence, saying some migrants threw stones and fireworks. Warsaw has accused Belarus of pushing over smaller groups of migrants at different locations. And Vietnam has welcomed its first foreign tourists in nearly 2 years, with the arrival of 200 fully vaccinated visitors from South Korea.
A Chinese journalist with close ties to the Communist Party says tennis player Peng Shuai will reappear in public soon. The former doubles champion hasn't been seen in public since making sexual assault allegations against a former vice premier. Global Times editor-in-chief Hu Xijing retweeted photos of Peng, which were posted by another journalist. He said he's confirmed that she has been at home for the past few days and will make her reappearance soon. The photos are purported to be screenshots of Peng's WeChat moments shared by her friend. It's unclear when the photos were taken. Earlier this month, in a post on social media, she said that former Vice Premier Zhang Gaoli forced her to have sex with him against her will and that they once had an extramarital relationship. The U.S. government, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the Women's Tennis Association have called on the Chinese government to provide proof that she is safe and to investigate the allegations of sexual abuse. Vietnam has opened its southern resort island to foreign tourists again for the first time since the coronavirus pandemic started. More than 200 South Korean travelers arrived on Phu Quoc Island on Saturday. Foreign visitors must be fully vaccinated, but they do not have to quarantine if they present a negative test upon arrival. All foreign travelers are required to use chartered flights, and they can only visit areas included in tour itineraries. They must also stay in designated accommodations. Vietnam has been allowing foreigners to visit to some parts of the country since mid-November. Government officials want to start accepting foreign tourists without any conditions during the second quarter of next year. The pandemic has dealt a serious blow to the nation's economy. The government permitted restaurants and factories to reopen in October, even in areas where the virus was spreading. But there has been a spike in cases recently. The daily tally nationwide topped 10,000 on Thursday. The EU drug regulator is backing emergency use of an oral COVID-19 drug developed by 2 U.S. firms. Officials with the European Medicines Agency have been screening Molnupiravir since last month. They say a review shows when the drug is taken within 5 days of the start of symptoms, it reduces the risk of hospitalization and death. They say the advice is intended to support countries that may want to deploy the pill to halt surging infection rates and deaths. The recommendation comes ahead of formal authorization of the antiviral drug. Molnupiravir is the product of a collaboration between pharmaceutical firm Merck and biotech company Ridgeback Biotherapeutics. It's designed to prevent the coronavirus from multiplying inside the human body. British regulators authorized its use earlier this month. Researchers say 1 in 3 pregnant women in Japan may have suffered depression and other disorders due to the prolonged effects of the coronavirus pandemic. The online survey by Kindai University Oriental Medicine Research Institute was carried out in June and July. It covered 1,022 pregnant women. Their answers were rated against a global scale that assesses mental health. The results suggest 1 in 3 pregnant women may have experienced psychological problems. Depression and anxiety disorders were reported by 385 respondents, or 37.7%. The researchers say the figure has almost tripled since a similar survey was conducted by Yokohama City University in September last year. That poll found that 13.2% of respondents may have suffered depression and other disorders. The institute's director, Takeda Takashi, says loneliness as well as the fear of coronavirus infection were among the risk factors.
I think it's necessary for medical professionals and government officials to intervene and help alleviate the stress.
He warns that psychological distress during pregnancy affects not only the mother, but also the unborn baby. A jury in the U.S. state of Wisconsin has acquitted a teenager of all charges in the fatal shooting of two men during protests last year. Kyle Rittenhouse opened fire in the city of Kenosha during protests over the police shooting of a black man. Rittenhouse faced charges including homicide. He acknowledged he shot two men dead, but said he acted in self-defense against the demonstrators. He was 17 years old at the time of the shooting. On Friday, the jurors found Rittenhouse not guilty after 4 days of deliberations. The verdict is final, as prosecutors cannot appeal. Rittenhouse has reportedly been linked to white supremacists. The jury was also overwhelmingly white. The National Guard has been dispatched to the area in the wake of the ruling as authorities step up vigilance against possible protests. President Joe Biden has issued a statement calling for calm. He said the verdict will leave many Americans feeling angry and concerned, but people must acknowledge that the jury has spoken. Biden urged people to express their views peacefully, consistent with the rule of law. The top U.S. official for the Indo-Pacific has spoken about the importance of the so-called Quad alliance of Japan, the U.S., Australia, and India. National Security Council Coordinator Kurt Campbell also revealed the leaders would hold in-person talks next year in Japan.
Japan has agreed to host the meeting in 2022, and we'll work with them on timing and to make sure we follow through on what we've committed to, which is extraordinarily important, but also look at new initiatives as well.
Campbell also said U.S. cooperation with allies in the region was causing what he called heartburn for China. He said China has labeled the efforts Cold War thinking. Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio said on Saturday the Quad countries have confirmed they will hold a summit every year, but he said they have not decided when and where the meetings will take place. Hundreds of Afghan evacuees in Japan are approaching the end of their visas. They fled their country in August when the Taliban took over, and now Japan's foreign ministry says it may extend how long they're allowed to stay. About 400 people have arrived in Japan so far. They include staff from the Japanese embassy in Kabul and a Japanese aid agency, as well as family members. They were given short-term visas valid for 90 days, and many of those are about to expire. But the situation in Afghanistan remains volatile, so ministry officials say they may offer the evacuees what's called a specified visa for designated activities. Those can be valid for longer. The ministry says many of the evacuees hope to return home in the future, and the government will continue to support them to that end. Pumice stones spewed by an undersea volcano have been wreaking havoc along Japan's Pacific coast for weeks, and now one Pacific island has installed barriers to keep the stones at bay. Workers on Miyake Island laid floats across all of its fishing ports. Local officials say pumice began washing up there on Friday. An NHK crew found clusters of pumice floating offshore Saturday morning. They also filmed stones stretching about 15 meters along a beach. A fisherman who usually sails from the port says it's been devastating to his business.
We still can't go out to sea because of those barriers. It's a big problem.
The Tokyo metropolitan government has sent people to monitor the situation. Those were the stories for this hour.